A good conversation can shift the direction of change forever. Would you leave it to chance? Join the authors of Design to Change and explore this series of conversations with designers and event owners. Driven by the need and conversations with event owners and event designers who use the event canvas around the world, this series explores the depths of conversations to elevate your abilities to look and act beyond the now. Episodes are hosted by Ruud Janssen, Roel Friesen, Dennis Lehrer, and Paul Rukens, with illustrious changemakers, designers, and pioneers in the field of design and beyond. To explore these conversations and additional content, visit designtochange.online. For now, let's start the conversation. Conversations.
All right, welcome back to the Design to Change conversations. Today, I have a very special guest. The last time we met in person was 7 years ago in Milan. And with me today is Merat Jaberansari. Merat, welcome to the Design to Change podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's so nice to see you and reconnect after so long, which doesn't feel like that long.
Right? Yeah. So the cadence of change, since we last met, I think it was right across from Duomo in Milan. We were invited, I think, by Panerai in their shop. I think they had an actual setup where, and we're looking at the screen grab here on the because I had to look up the picture when the exact date was. And I remember you were facilitating a session for the FBN, right, the Family Business Network Next Gen community, which you've been actively involved in for many, many years. And at the same time, I remember that, the way that you carry conversations has a very interesting aspect. And I'd like to dig into that today. But before we do that, Mehrad, I'd like to ask you the question from the Design to Change on the first book, which is: a good conversation can shift the direction of change forever. Would you leave it to chance?
I love a spontaneous conversation. I think I've been in conversations that have been spontaneous and have changed my mindset or my path. But as an event curator, I believe I would rather not leave it to chance. I think there's certain infrastructure, just structure that can be put in place, and a nice balance of preparation in advance that can engineer serendipity and double down on the impact of these conversations and honor the time and the investment of the participants out of respect, but also I've also been in facilitated conversations that have been wonderful. So that's been my journey that I love to replicate more and more with the people that I co-design, whether it's a dinner, a talk, a panel, whatever it might be. I would not leave it to chance. That would be my answer.
And I think with that, there's the word that you mentioned that I think is very interesting. The curator role that you. I remember you having that when you were. Were you the president of the Next Gen community? I think on the board of FBN. Or yeah, correct. Huh?
Yeah.
Maybe to give people a sense of context, could you share a little bit about that? Because now you're very active with an organization called the Conduit. But we met at the time when you were active with the Family Business Network, and you're still active with it because you just got back from Malaysia, I think, from having conferences with them. Share a little bit about your activities and how people might place you in that as a curator.
Of course. So yes, the Family Business Network, I've been involved for a decade now. And after the first summit I attended with my own family, I got absorbed into the leadership team, a group of volunteers that come together and think about what would be interesting projects to work on across the international network. By Next Gens for the Next Gens, and I had this curiosity of what do next gen entrepreneurs do outside of the family business or how they innovate inside. And long story short, it led to a new community and a new project first, which I led. And I worked with Dominique, who you know very well, to
Who's
kind
also
of,
been
we
on the
started by,
podcast together with Natsuda.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Uh, we brought back the next gen awardees of the past decade, first
Hmm.
and then I was the program director for the second Entrepreneurs Day at FBN. Following that, I started leading the Next Gen community, which is the largest community at FBN with about 8,000 people around the world. But
Wow.
did that for 3 years, served on the board of directors, which I still do as well. So I've been on the board for 5 years. I had my own succession recently, last February in Madrid. And now I serve in an additional role, a new role, which is the vice chair of all 6 communities at FBN. So it's not just the
Okay.
next gen, also the now gen, the entrepreneurs, the family office, large families, and the impact communities, basically serving as a liaison with our communities director, the board, and the leaders of the communities. So that's my involvement. And then at the Conduit, that's my professional role, my day job, for lack of a better word. But this
Yeah.
is, um, again, the same community work and everything I've learned and activated and designed at FBN also applies here because it's a global community of change makers. Everyone's committed to positive impact, but coming from all walks of life and working on different things. So I'm director of strategic engagement at the Conduit. It's a physical building in central London in the heart of Covent Garden. Um,
Hmm.
we have 12 thematic communities. So I work with our lovely community manager, Ella, and the wider team on the architecture of the community, the members' experience, and how we co-create with our members. Our focus and our kind of one impact KPI is meaningful connections. So once I entered this role, I started curating these member-led dinners, very intimate, on a specific topic of a member's expertise that falls into our 6 areas of impact. For example, AI for good is one of them.
Hmm.
And then I spend half an hour with the member, and then we think about the urgency, what would be the shift that they're looking for, and if this dinner goes really well. But also, then the team and I look at our membership and try to bring together people that don't normally speak together, right? So we like to have that diversity of expertise, but also lived experience and backgrounds and profiles around the table. And have, for example, someone from the corporate sector, someone from nonprofits, a young entrepreneur, a family office, someone from academia, someone from policy, from tech. And then uh, the magic really happens there where people start to think in ways perhaps that they hadn't on a day-to-day. I think we all kind of try to do our best and fulfill our roles in silos. But the Conduit's mission is to break these silos and catalyze all the amazing work that everyone around the world is doing for a more just, prosperous, and sustainable future. Sorry, that sounds a bit tagliney, but it is the Conduit's mission. And I say it a few times a day because I really believe in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That,
so,
that's curation in my experience and what I'm focusing on at the moment, and I'm really enjoying.
yeah, and I like how you also, let's say, if you look at the Conduit, tagline, it is a gathering place for change, right? So if Design to Change, which this podcast is about, is about drive change by mastering event design conversations. You're taking it to the next level of curation where you're bringing together the voices of people that have the lived experience from different backgrounds and different perspectives to tackle big topics in a space where people get together face to face. And you mentioned Covent Garden. Is that where your offices are, or do you also have a place where you actually do the gatherings there, or what does that
Yeah,
look like for those that haven't come across the Conduit before?
yeah, it's a full building in Covent Garden, and it's basically a members club. So
Yeah.
there's multiple floors. There's an event floor. There's a lounge. There's a rooftop restaurant. And we do about 150, over 150 talks in the program. So these are Nobel Prize winners, industry experts, thought leaders. And then that's on top of all the community gatherings that we do. And by those, I mean the member-to-member exchanges, peer-to-peer sharings, the happy hours, which we call Ubuntu hours, because Ubuntu, it's a South African concept coined by Nelson Mandela or amplified by Nelson Mandela of that I am
Mm.
are. And that's at the core philosophy of the Conduit, because our founder is also a human rights lawyer from South Africa. He worked in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission after apartheid. So
Wow.
yeah, there's a physical building, and then we have a little office around the corner just to not take space from the members and do the doing, all the behind the scenes work. Let's put it that way.
So there's an infrastructure in place to create these gatherings. There's a membership system in place to connect people to the subject matter. Um, who becomes member and why do they become a member? Or how do they become a member? Can I ask that question?
Yeah, of course. So anyone is welcome to apply, right? Fill in the application form. The team then vets their profile and so on. But we like to be as inclusive as possible because we believe that's what the world needs, right? We don't
Mm,
shun or shame anyone. I think what really matters is the intentionality of the individuals. Regardless of the organizations they work in. I think a lot of the time we have, for example, like chief sustainability officers that tell
mm,
us we're so alone in our organization because we have to beat the drums of like why it's important to think about certain things. But when we walk into the doors of the conduit, we feel like we are not alone. And it's so refreshing because everyone's on
mm,
stage. And then they really find community there to then share best practices, but also talk about the serious stuff, but also find joy and delight and what we call ethical desires. Um, or let's talk about how the asylum system of the world is outdated since it's been set up post World War II, but over a lovely dinner on a beautiful rooftop. And I think
mm,
that's uh, uh, it empowers our members to keep going because I think
mm,
burnout and anxiety and climate anxiety, these topics are really doubled down for people who work in the impact space. Because you
mm.
think if I put another hour, I save another uh, vulnerable person on the other side of the world and so on. So it's really important that the humanity of change makers gets respected and honored and nurtured. And that's basically what we try to do and constantly learning and learning a
Yeah.
lot from our members as well, which I love.
Now, I wonder, as you're saying this, right, where obviously family businesses from that background that, may I also ask, because this is how you got into the Conduit, how did you get into the family business network before that? Because there's moment of pivotal connections where things happen, and as a result, you become committed or engaged into driving some of that change or spending your volunteer time to or your professional time in a specific community, right? What was the pivotal moment, other pivotal moments before that led you into those roles? Just curious to ask.
So I think if I look back, I was always interested in events, right? So I remember right off the back of graduating from high school, went volunteering in Peru, and I came back and I was like, I went to the year below me and I said, I will single-handedly organize your prom, like your after
Mhm,
party after your
mhm,
prom. If um, everyone commits that a part of the money that everyone puts in goes to that charity that I was volunteering for in Peru. And I also spoke
mhm,
to the club to kind of help the fundraising. So for I just wanted to kind of send back a portion and I think that's when the journey started. I was always very active in university clubs, whether it was Model United Nations or uh, organizing different events in my student years. Um,
Mm,
and FBN, I basically joined it and found it due to my personal journey, right, in our family business. So I'm third generation of our family, and we had questions around succession and what does that look like? Is it a responsibility? Is it a task? Is it a project? What do the different avenues look like? And kind of typical questions every next gen in some shape or form thinks about once they get to their mid-20s and beyond. So
yeah,
I, through an old classmate of mine in London, I came across it. We attended our first summit in Montreux, the global summit. And I think we always say in FBN that your first summit is the one that you always remember. And just you feel you're not alone, that your family is not the only crazy one. And you really reach that level of acceptance that, okay, this
yeah,
is fine. And every family has a crazy uncle or an aunt, and all these little realities that get thrown around as jokes. But what it really helps is that sense of belonging, which is
yeah,
very unique and rare. And then there was this application announced that if anyone wants to join the next gen leadership team, put your hand up. And I wouldn't even have thought about it, but my friends who I knew from before were like, you should apply, you should apply. You're so like, you would be a great addition. So I was like, okay, what do I have to lose? I applied and I got accepted, and it's just been a wonderful journey since.
yeah.
Then another pivotal moment was my first Next Gen Summit the following year in
Yeah.
Tallinn, Sweden, where it was the first time I experienced the art of facilitation. And
Okay.
that was when we were put into groups of 4 or 5, and there was a series of questions that the hosts took us through. And it was like peeling the layers of an onion. It started with like share
Yeah.
your name, and then it got deeper with emotions and so on. Before I knew it, with those 5 people, we were all crying, pouring our hearts out. And some of those connections I made are still my best friends in life. You wouldn't believe that.
Wow. Yeah.
The- One of
That's when you know conversations have had a real impact, right?
Absolutely. And I was just, my mind was blown, and I was like, this is incredible. And like, look at what impact it's had on me, but also like, beautiful friendship. She's my hotline. It's like, or the group that we had together, we still go back to each other whenever, we have an argument, or something that's really deep and is hard to share with anyone else. So after that experience of like, I would love to be able to do this for other people.
Yeah.
And then the rest was history. So got involved and tried to bring together people. Um, and then another pivotal moment was after my MBA. I was kind of looking for what's my purpose statement, right? I think a lot of us, we've been through phases in life where we know what we don't want to do, but we're not sure what we do want to do. So I worked with a coach just to get to be able to articulate my purpose statement. And that was to energize and mobilize other units of positive change. Once I had that down, it basically pointed me to all the right directions. People were so generous, and I came across the Conduit through a conversation around impact investing. And that's how I started working with Conduit Connect first. It's a sister company focused on impact investing, and then serving in the holding company of the club for the past 3 years. So that's a very long answer to your short question.
Wow. Can you repeat that, the purpose statement? Because I think it's important that, you you have such clarity about it, and you've worked on it because you knew what you didn't want to do, but then you had to almost like find the compass of what you do want to spend your energy and time on. Can you repeat your purpose statement? Because I think the clarity you have, and also the fact that you just, you know, you can just, state it like this in a podcast, and you confided in me. You said, "This is the first podcast I'm going to be recording." So, you know, uh, um, I always find it remarkable and actually critical, for people to be able to identify, their purpose or their values and have clarity about it. But if you ask point blank people what it is, very often they struggle to formulate it. How can you repeat it and then tell us how did you embed it into your like memory, into your being, into your system for you to be able to like operate using that purpose?
Sure. Well, my purpose statement is energizing and mobilizing other units of positive change. And I think the flip side of that was that I very much growing up thought that I need to be an entrepreneur, right? Because
Mm,
coming from a family business, you're constantly told, you're a business owner and we are business owners and you have to, that's going to be your fate one day and so on. So that was really ingrained, and I'm very privileged to have had the opportunity to actually expose myself to that. And that FBN journey, that event you mentioned at the start in Milan, was part of that journey, right? To explore what does it mean to be an entrepreneur outside of the main business? Because I always knew I would never be a part of it.
mm,
Want to. But I got to a point where I realized I'm not an entrepreneur, never want to be. It's a lonely road. I like people and I like connecting people. So
mhm,
that was basically the foundation for it to then be able to transform that into a positive purpose statement that
yeah,
would unlock my energy and focus to be able to find the right platform or the right
mhm,
role for myself to be able
mhm,
to maximize my impact. Because
mhm,
that kind of marriage between purpose and profit and impact was also another red string across my career. And I really wanted to double down on that. And first, it was through social entrepreneurship and exploring that, but also impact investing. And then came along the Conduit, where it's really about bringing people together, catalyzing impact through relationships, and you know, bringing together capital, content, and communities to be able to maximize everything that we're doing. Because God knows the world needs some help right now.
oh yeah. Capital, content, and communities that come together. I think
Yes.
that's a powerful combo of three C's, that if you orchestrate and curate them properly, you can make things happen. Um, Curious to ask, now that you have all this experience in, building communities, um, both as a volunteer role, but also as a you say your daytime role or your uh,
Passion.
um, your profession now as director of strategic engagement at the Conduit, and leading teams and strategic engagement initiatives and doing these 150 events, together with a team, I suppose, of people who put these on at Covent Garden and beyond. What do you think is the hardest part about creating an event or being an event owner?
Oh, I think I like to create events with the right people, right? Because I think it's important to have that humility that it takes a village, and there are so many interesting people out there with incredible expertise or lived experiences. Um, and I think creating some thinking through a level of consistency, which I've always admired you, Ruud, of how you go about it. Even what you shared with me, that you invite your guests each year to check in after that. I mean, that is just a beautiful format. So I think one of the things I've been focusing on in our community and what our members of the Conduit have fed back to us is they want rhythm, predictability, and depth. And I think those three things are not, they might be, they're the most important things for me right now in hosting, organizing, curating events.
Hmm.
Uh, they can be the hardest parts, each of them, until they're not. So
Mm.
that's what comes into my mind as kind of the hardest part. The other is to basically have that acumen and depth of knowledge of uh, each community to understand who would be the right people to go on this journey with for each
Hmm.
event
Hmm.
or a series of events, for example.
Yeah. So, and that's interesting that you mentioned that because it also begs the question, if you're looking for, or if your members are looking for rhythm, predictability, and depth, right? So you said that um, that's what they need, or that's what they say they want, right? So the want is not always, per definition, the need, right? So scratch beyond the want three times, and you might, start identifying the need. Um, are you able, with the events that you organize, right? Because I'm looking at your website, I'm seeing you have events around arts and culture and climate and sustainability, economic empowerment, health and well-being. You've got peace and security, social and racial equity, and you have live streams that you have going on. So there's this whole myriad of events that you're hosting over time. Um, if you would look at the DNA of the events of the Conduit for a moment, right, and consider the let's say the cultural footprint of an event, right? Because if you're talking about predictability, the rhythm and the depth, then apparently your members are looking for something that they recognize themselves in, that makes them feel like they belong at the Conduit and want to be part of these exercises and these events, spend their time there. Um, but would you be able to describe, or would it be helpful, let me ask that question, as an event owner, to be able to actually have a cultural footprint of each of the events that you organize? Meaning an event culture analysis, something that would be able to like quantify and codify the actual ingredients of the event,
Mm.
be then able to place them over time. Meaning, you probably remember the first conference that you went to from the Conduits, right? And give me an estimate. How many events do you think you've participated in at the Mehrad or at the Conduit? Sorry. Um, how many events have you been to? Just top of mind. Like, is it like,
Myself?
yeah?
Uh,
Did you keep track, or is it?
Absolutely not. No, I
No.
think because, every week it's actually one of my team's dilemmas. Like we look at the program and we're like, oh my God, I would love to go to this. And then realize we have another commitment or a call or a meeting. And we
Yeah.
obviously used to do our best, but just on a personal level, we'd love to be in every single one
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's not possible. So no, I do not count it in my head because it's just
We
um
just had 150 events per year that are
that's
being
like three a
hosted.
week on average, just in the
Wow.
program. On top of that, we have our community gatherings, right?
Yeah.
Which could be, as I said, like a happy hour or a sharing circle, or an expert comes from outside to, share what they're doing with a group of our members who are interested in that topic and things like that.
Yeah.
So, or the dinners and the breakfasts that we curate and so on. So there is so much I would not be bothered to count it. And also, like, why would I count it? So I ask myself. So I think maybe I'd like to start with the risks of event hosting
Yeah.
and then come to your question of culture. So
Yeah.
I think one of the risks is that an event becomes an event for the sake of having an event, right?
Yeah.
Like that is not the thing to count. And there was a time where, I think Before my time at the Conduit, it was like, okay, let's make sure to have four events per community group throughout the year, right? And I think the learning and the observation and the feedback from the community is like, that's not really the right way to think about it or to measure it
Mm.
because in some instances on some topics, intentionally put together Ubuntu hour or version of the happy hour
Mm.
can be just as interesting and exciting as a panel discussion, or even more exciting sometimes, panel discussion with, you know, experts from organizations with big names, right?
Yeah.
So that I think I've taken it to heart. I've lived through it, as a member and participant in FPN events, but an event should not just exist or come about for the sake of it. And also, what I am conscious of is like events that you feel the need that you just need to fill the room, something's not right, right? It's
Yeah.
like I'm sure every event planner's been experienced this, where it's like, okay, we need a few more people in, and you go, you ask the cashier from Pret a Manger to your cousin to everyone, and I'm 100% exaggerating, but you know what I mean. Uh,
Yeah.
Fill the room. That's not a good event or precedent for event planning in my experience. Um, but so what I would focus on is, the depth of those conversations, the meaningful connections, and for each person, meaningful means a different thing, and that's beautiful. We just started a meaningful connections draw where members that share their stories, they enter a draw and they can win a prize, and we have a story a month that they win a prize for, and then we amplify. So I think the feedback from the participants afterwards is what I'm always very keen to hear. Um,
Mm.
how it's been and what's shifted, what has come about. But also sometimes there's a lag and a delay, and you hear about it in the future. And that's just been a launch pad for it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are the things that came quite
Well,
concrete.
if like you said, it's not about the number of events. It's not. Um, it's the value of the events gets measured in a different currency, right? It's the questions, it's the shifts that are actually happening as a result of it in the different stakeholder types. um, in the Design to Change book and in our work at the Event Design Collective, we consider that the only thing that creates value at events is behavior change, right? So the currency of measuring impact, the way that an event creates value is how it's able to craft, quantify, and celebrate progress over time, right? And to measure progress, you do need to be clear about the markers of change from each stakeholder perspective that you're looking to delight, and then be able to articulate the entry and exit behaviors, not just of the event itself, but of that stakeholder over time, but potentially, being part of that community and having gone through a series of events, because that's, like you said, it's either their lived experience or it's their expertise or it's where they want to spend their time because it fits their purpose and they want to contribute to moving the needle and maybe holding the compass for a moment or determining contributing to the actual change and impact in that specific part of what they can influence. Because like you said, if you have so many fields of interest and such a large community, aggregating the right people to work on the right things or to spend their time on the right things becomes, yeah, an orchestration of such a caliber, that would make it and because it's a live organism of people who come in and out of their attention zone or might change their purpose on the way as well. That can be quite a difficult task, let's say, to look at objectively, right?
100%.
Um, yeah,
And I
and I
like
think
your
one of the yeah, sorry, go ahead.
use of the word organism because that was also another term I've coined internally that our communities are living organisms. And we need
Yeah,
to honor if they're growing, if their interest has shifted,
Yeah,
and it's absolutely fine to sunset one community and then give rise to another and create the space and time for that,
yeah,
because that's how we remain relevant.
yeah,
There's so many forces in play with what's happening in the world, with what our members are experiencing, that I love that terminology of like living organisms. I think
yeah,
that also something that to not take personally or get defensive about. When something's not working, it's not working, and that's absolutely fine. And it did for a while, it served its purpose, and we can move on.
yeah. And I think the falling in love with the thing that you created, but also falling out of love with it in order to move on to the next thing is just as critical, right? In terms of, um, you mentioned before, like the succession planning and, handing over to whoever comes next in that role, whether it's, the volunteer role at FBN or in business, where, if you think about, you said you're a third generation, but never want to be the entrepreneur that maybe people expected you to be, or that your, previous generations were eager to fulfill. Um, and I like how you speak about next gen and the now gen and what category do you think you are right now? What?
Controversial topic, the last one, because classically they were referred to as senior gen, but
Yeah.
some were not happy with that
Oh
label.
yeah.
There's a nicer one called wise gen, because they have all
Yeah.
of that experience under their belt.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's multiple ways of referring to that top of the
So
pinnacle.
the words that people feel associated to matter, right?
Words matter.
Because they embody a set of values, right? I suppose, and the values are what underlies the culture, and the culture is what makes people feel belong to that specific community
Yeah.
or not, right?
Yeah.
Um,
How do I describe myself? I think next gen on the cusp of now gen, right? And I
on the
think,
cusp,
yeah,
right?
the transition out of the next gen president role, coincidentally, it came timely because now I'm getting, more involved with the family and trying to help with leading our family governance and so on,
Yeah,
because now Gen's next gen is described by age, right? So if you're between 18 to 40, you're a next gen. But now gen, it's loosely people between 35 to 55, but that's not the indicator. It's by self-identification. If you have a role
yeah,
or responsibility in the family or the business, then
yeah.
you are now gen. And like
Hmm.
probably the parents are still around, you might have kids. So it's just like a different
Yeah,
set of challenges and opportunities to talk about.
yeah. And the one thing I really appreciated at the Family Business Network is that in the values of dealing with how people communicate with each other, non-solicitation environment. It's a very open and very honest um, um, DNA of the events as they are, right? Because um, by definition, that's something that's required to create that zone where you feel so safe, as you mentioned in that first conference that you went to, where friendships and real topics are being broken down to a degree where the some of the nerves that are in as part of being in that space can be addressed and are addressed in a safe space. And I think it's a very powerful dynamic, but also a big responsibility for those that facilitate or host the events to secure that environment properly, right? And to
100%.
contain, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that
the
the most valuable thing at FBN is its safe space,
yeah,
which then is designed thanks to its code of conduct. And I think that is also a parallel with the conduit, because
mhm,
we call them house rules, and the code of conduct of the conduit it's very similar because, as you say, in event planning, but also just holding a community, it's absolutely crucial to maintain that safe space, to be able to create the space for the peer-to-peer exchanges, the kinds of conversations that really come viscerally, and those
Yeah.
are when things shift for people and impact can get catalyzed. So I do always recite the Conduit's Code of Conduct at the start of every curated dinner or breakfast.
Yeah.
And what I find is that it just sets the tone. And
Yeah.
as soon as I mention, confidentiality, Chatham House rules, and non-solicitation, everyone, almost without exception, just nods their head and they feel a sense of
Locks
relief.
it in. Yeah.
Everyone's relaxed. They're like, okay, I'm not gonna go around the table self-promoting here. That's so refreshing and wonderful. We're in
Yeah.
for this. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think um, stating that, although everybody might know it and might have read it and signed up for it as they became a member, you have to set the scene, which is probably facilitation skill 101 for the event host, the event owner, but also those involved in the event. They have to really be clear about the boundaries and the parameters you set around the expectations, right, that people have of that space that you've created for them to be in for that moment. Yeah. Um, this is the onstage part, Mehrad, but in a minute we're going to go backstage, right? And I'm going to try something new that I haven't done before. Um, because it is your first podcast that you're recording with us. And this is our inaugural kind of conversation after a 7-year hiatus, right? But before we do that, I wanted to ask a question, which is about your personal horizon of change, right? Mehrad, if you think about your horizon of change, as you look, here I'm looking out onto this little hill in Switzerland. Um, um, what's currently on your horizon of change if you look outward for you?
I think it really doubles down on my purpose statement. And I'm literally just thinking this out now as you asked the question.
Yeah.
Um, I think, and that translates into my team at the Conduit. I think I am very much invested in seeing them thrive and develop and be able to do their best work. Because holding a community, usually people who are in these roles, they have to be highly empathetic and we absorb a lot of energy. And other people's whether it's their grievance, something that happens in their life, something they're struggling with, something that they need help with. So it's a lot of weight to hold.
Yeah.
And I have so much respect and admiration for that. So I think that, which then leads on to the second part, which is to really, now that we have an incredible community, how do we leverage the power of community to push ourselves even further in catalyzing impact?
Mm-hmm.
And so to give you an example, like one of the projects that I'm currently working on, I had the honor of being the project lead for this inaugural Young Innovator Awards, the Conduit's Young Innovator Awards 3.5 years ago. And uh, we're just about to launch its fourth edition this year.
Mm-hmm.
To give you an idea, these are awards for celebrating 18 to 30-year-old impact entrepreneurs that are in the very start of their journey, the first 2 years. And they
Mm-hmm.
get a cash prize, they get membership to the Conduit, and they get support and mentorship from the community. And until now, it's been an open application focused on a moment where the awards are announced, the winners are announced. And this year, we're challenging ourselves, and this is largely my own initiative, to take the by members for members aspect and double down on it even more. So
Mm-hmm.
the applicants will be nominated and sponsored by our members. And then we want to have multiple touch points throughout the year. The capital,
Mhm.
the prize money comes fully from our members as well. And we have multiple categories. And now we have the technological infrastructure to be able to really intentionally connect the awardees and the runners-up with people across the community. So that is something that I want to my horizon of change in terms of seeing more tangible impact in setting other units of positive change up for success.
I like that. And what I'd like to do is to escape backstage, right, in just a moment. Before I do that, I wanted to ask you, is it okay if next year I reach out to you and remind you and maybe have a second chat? We're not going to leave the gap of 7 years, but maybe just 1 year. And then talk about, how you doubled down on the purpose statement and how you pushed further in catalyzing the impact. And then maybe, keeping that Young Innovator Award at the Conduit in mind as a um, maybe as a celebration of that, right? Or as a way to to see if you crafted, quantified, and are able to celebrate the progress that you've, literally I surprised you with the question, but I think your eloquence in being able to articulate it says a lot about your clarity on your purpose, but also your ability to then say, okay, this is already living in you. Now it bubbles out of you. Now it's, it is one of the, that North Star gets doubled down on. And a year from today, although change feels like it goes very slowly most of the time, sometimes when you look back a year and you go, whoa, we did all of that, right? That can be a pretty significant experience, right? That can actually be shared. And with your permission, I wanted to invite you next year for that conversation, right? Would you be
Absolutely.
up for that, Mehrad?
I'd be honored. And I love that you're asking the permission. I'm sure that's also intentional. And I'm constantly learning from you, Ruud, from day one. Thank you
Well,
so
I
much.
really appreciate that, and I can't wait to actually go backstage and talk a little bit more about this with you. In the meantime, if you're curious to hear more about, can you actually measure the culture of an event? Um, as we play the closing jingle, I'm going to share not just a picture of when we met last on the 7th of, sorry, back on 30 November 2019 in Milan, but I'm going to share something that just on the screen for to trigger and spark a conversation maybe into the future, which is an event that you have upcoming in June at the Conduit called the Climate and let me just look it up here. The Climate and the Future of Health, right? Which is a big event around Climate Action Week in London. And I just pulled a really quick kind of event culture analysis and to see if I could trigger a reaction backstage for you on this opportunity of being able to measure culture a little bit more tangibly. So I look forward to seeing you in just a minute backstage in the next episode. All right, see you in a moment, Mehrad, and thank you for the onstage part.
See you on the other side. Thank you.
This has been another episode of the Design to Change Designer Conversation series. Explore these conversations and additional content at designtochange.online. Want more right now? Tune into the backstage episode of this conversation and hear what the experts discuss offstage.